This is Greece, where people come to see the ancient ruins, bask in history, and be a part of the birthplace of the civilization. People reconnect with their souls and find their mojo. This is precisely what has brought Georgia, a Greek American, to Greece, and of course, her work as a classic Greek professor at Athens University. But as luck would have it, the university suffered budget cuts, and she was laid off. Left with no better opportunity, Georgia has taken up a job as a tour guide at Pangloss Tours. For Georgia, it is like hitting rock bottom. Just because she can't teach at the university, she has inadvertently made the tourists her students to whom she delivers lectures on ancient Greece. But no tourist wants that when they are on vacation, so they end up giving her average remarks, which is the lowest remarks they can give in the evaluation application. Her boss, Maria, reminds Georgia that her tourists find her boring. But Georgia is quick to shift the blame on the tourists. Georgia even questions Maria's choice of giving her the most difficult lots, which include drunk Australians, rude Americans, miserable couples, disgusted with men but still looking divorcees, and the classic old people, no pun intended. Georgia's eyes suddenly light up upon seeing the Canadian tourists, and she asks Maria if she can have them. Maria outrightly refuses because Nico, Georgia's rival, has already claimed them. Georgia, once again, is disappointed that just because Nico has better ratings than her, he always gets the good lot. Maria assigns Poopy, the creepy hairy guy, to Georgia's group as their day's driver. Georgia isn't happy, but she doesn't have a say in this, and she lays out the rules loud and clear. Poopy cannot speed, smoke, or eat while driving. Poopy just gives her a nonchalant look, making Georgia believe he doesn't understand English. To add to her woes, Nico visits Maria with a gift box, and Georgia realizes it is not because of the ratings, but because Nico has been bribing Maria, so he always ends up getting the good group. After Georgia leaves, Maria starts complaining about how bad Georgia is at her work, and how she is not passionate about her job. Nico offers to get Georgia fired in exchange for a raise, and Maria agrees without thinking twice. Meanwhile, Georgia meets her group, a bunch of interesting people. One of them, Irv, a self-claimed comedian, isn't shy to share his obsession with the revealing statues and shares what he intends to do with them. He even tries to flirt with Georgia, claiming he likes women with a mustache. The drunk Australians are another story, because anybody can hardly understand a word they're saying. Once Georgia's group assembles, they are ready to depart. To their shock, the bus provided to them is old, run down, and spooky. However, Georgia ignores it, trying to keep up her cheerful act and continues as if it's nothing. The group soon starts boarding the bus, and with some new additions of non-English speaking ladies and an American named Gator who has no idea he is in Greece, they are ready to roll. Just as Georgia starts introducing herself, Nico shows up as an uninvited guest. He has bought warm donuts, but just as the tourists get excited to receive a free donut, he acts as if he mistakenly got into the wrong bus, ruining everybody, especially Georgia's mood. After Nico deboards, the tourists ask for a free treat, which Georgia mumbles she'll try getting. They start their journey, and Georgia has barely started speaking when one of the tourists, Dorcas, gets up and cheers everybody with free souvenirs. At least now they're not angry. But little do they know, their trip is only going to get worse. Soon, another tourist asks Georgia to switch on the air conditioning, as it is getting stuffy. Poopy switches it on and soon enough, the entire bus becomes a gas chamber. They decide it would be better to keep it switched off. Another tourist wants to know their driver's name, and when Poopy tells them they can call him Poopy, or by his last name, Kakas, everybody starts laughing because, believe it or not, their accents make it sound like something else. But Poopy doesn't mind because, according to him, laughing is good for health. They soon arrive at their first location, and Georgia briefs them about the security of their things, and how they can leave their valuables on the bus that will be locked at their stoppages. But the tourists' attention span doesn't allow them to listen to what Georgia said the first time, making her repeat herself multiple times. Finally moving on, Georgia starts telling them about the origin of Tholos, when the tourists get restless like a bunch of school kids and start demanding ice cream or something to eat. Nico and his group are right behind them, and he brings out a huge cutout for the tourists to take pictures as Zeus. Georgia's group finds it more interesting than hers, but reluctantly follows her to the next monument. While Georgia passionately talks about the art and architecture of these monuments built thousands of years ago, Nico doesn't waste time in explaining the history, and directs his group's attention to the souvenirs of the monument made of soap. He doesn't stop there and invites Georgia's group for the shopping. Much to Georgia's chagrin, Poopy stays back with Georgia, who takes out her frustration on him and questions herself for doing something she doesn't even like. Above that, the Pangloss Tours isn't paying her well, and they book the worst rooms, and she doesn't even have any friends. She doesn't stop there and goes on to say how dry her personal life has been when Poopy remarks in English, surprising Georgia. Poopy proves to be a gentleman and encourages Georgia to talk. Having 3 sisters has taught him that women need to vent their frustration, and lending an ear sometimes is all they need. She starts talking about life plans, but when Poopy says he is content with what he's doing, that is, driving a bus, because it pays well, Georgia finds it hard to believe how someone cannot have their life figured out. So Poopy asks her to relax and offers to take her out for coffee. Georgia is hesitant because according to her, they are working, but Poopy encourages her that everyone should take time out for coffee. But when Georgia mockingly calls it the typical Greek mentality, Poopy gets upset and reminds her that she is uptight and skinny because of her rigid beliefs. Georgia couldn't care less, and after gathering her group, she excitedly tells them she's got them snacks. But the group starts questioning the quality of the dish they have never heard of. Nico suddenly interrupts and invites them to a cafe that serves chicken nuggets and French fries. The rest of the tour isn't so great, because Georgia has so much to tell, but the group is already exhausted. So, taking the hint, she decides to let them rest. As she is about to sit, she finds a flower left for her on her seat. Wondering who must have left it, she looks around. Suddenly Mark, a good-looking American in her group, calls out to her and winks. Georgia winks back and thinks the flower is from him. While she starts dreaming about the dry spell and her life finally being over, Mark asks fellow tourists for eye drops because he got some sunblock in his eye, making it twitch. They soon reach their hotel, which can easily be rated as the worst hotel on Yelp. Georgia is shocked to find Nico has got the best hotels in Greece, but what can she do? She somehow manages to send the tourists to their respective rooms after a gazillion lift trips because, apparently, the lift only has a capacity of 3 people at a time. Finally, when it is her turn to go, the lift gives in. Poopy joins her, and as the two make their way to the 5th floor, Georgia starts complaining again. It is not that she is exaggerating, because what she says is all true. The taps don't work as they're supposed to. There is no privacy. As the bathroom door for one guest might be the closet door for his neighbor, and the toilets often break but still no one cares, because Greeks are resilient to these petty problems. Greece was a happening place 25 years ago, the birthplace of art, democracy, and philosophy, until they discovered the nap. She is so irritated that she doesn't leave without commenting on Poopy's hair. Frustrated, she enters a very basic room, which turns into a nightmare when the TV blows. The phone doesn't have a wire, and when she tries to complain to Maria, she gets the phone slammed in her face. Georgia has had enough, so she writes a letter to Maria stating that after this tour, she will quit. The next morning she asks the receptionist to mail the letter to her, but he charges her 10 times more, which she complies with because it is the only way to escape his creepy flirting efforts. He even ends up spilling coffee on the letter. The second day of the tour is also the same. The tourists are more interested in looking at things than knowing about the relevance of the place. So Georgia takes a step back and lets her group see the place on their own. One of the couple, the Tullens in the group, have a teenage daughter, Caitlin, who doesn't seem to enjoy herself. So Irv takes the initiative to bring a smile to her face and offers to take the family's picture. He starts the countdown and doesn't stop till he can get Caitlin to smile. The girl immediately smiles for the ordeal to be over, and he clicks the picture. When he shows it to the family, a real smile spreads on her face, because both her parents look annoyed while she looks happy. Irritated by this, the mother, Mrs. Tullen, who is always angry for some reason, rushes to Georgia to complain about Irv, but gets into an altercation because Georgia doesn't want to deal with their tantrums anymore. Mrs. Tullen threatens to complain about Georgia to her supervisor, so Georgia brings out the evaluation forms and hands them out, saying they can evaluate her however they want, since it is going to be her last tour anyway. Irv tries to make a joke to placate the situation and says he used to travel with his wife, but this is the worst of all the tours he has been on. Georgia suddenly becomes rude and inadvertently hurts him by remarking that his wife must also have been sick of his jokes, but then realizes what he meant by her not being there with him on this trip. She apologizes, but the damage has already been done, and Irv walks away to be alone for some time. Georgia feels guilty about how she acted, but keeps her composure and decides to take the group shopping. Poopy suggests a nice place, and Georgia agrees without arguing. The plan is a success until a local shopkeeper gets into an altercation with the couple, forcing Georgia to intervene. She agrees to translate, and even though the shopkeeper calls them names for choosing an object made in Korea in unimaginable circumstances, and offers them an authentic Greek souvenir, Georgia handles it well, eliminating all the curse words, of course, and things settle down with the couple buying the authentic piece, making the shopkeeper happy. Meanwhile, 2 American tourists try to woo the Spanish divorcee women. They take off their shirts and start acting like dudes in Baywatch. They start flexing, making everybody around them giggle. Georgia watches her group having their second ice cream since morning and wonders what is so good about it. Poopy buys one for her, but when she tries to decline, he says it is for her to give to Irv as a peace offering. Georgia takes the cone to Irv, who is still upset. He refuses to take it, and to prevent the cream from melting, Georgia eats it and realizes how tasty it is. Georgia sits by Irv and apologizes for what she said. Irv smiles and starts talking about his wife and how she, too, didn't find him funny. They used to fight every day, even on trips. But even so, he woke up every day smiling. Georgia wishes she could be like that, and Irv encourages her to open up. Georgia tries doing that and ends up getting ice cream all over her blazer. However, she doesn't fret about it as much as she would have in other situations, and decides to go along. After gathering her group, she asks them to board the bus for their next location and finds another flower left for her. She looks at Mark and smiles, and he smiles back just as a polite gesture. Dorcas still hasn't come, so they are waiting for her. In the meantime, Georgia apologizes for her unprofessional behavior, and Irv does too, adding humor that lightens everybody's mood. Dorcas soon shows up and again gives free gifts to the Spanish divorcees, making us think she might have a problem since she likes to put anything she sees in her purse, paid or not. Georgia quickly picks up on what Dorcas did and asks Poopy to drive, while the unfortunate shopkeeper runs behind the bus after he spots the necklaces that went missing from his shop with the Spanish women. On their next sight, her group, as usual, scatter before she can finish her fun fact session, and she is left ignored once again. Irv realizes what Georgia might be going through and decides to talk to her. After talking to him, Georgie feels better and gets a little nudge on not rubbing the facts in the tourists' faces, but tweaking her way of telling things so they enjoy the history and show interest. The plan works, and the group actually seems to listen to what Georgia is telling them. However, she still has a long way to go with Caitlin, who keeps her distance. Later that night, at dinner, Georgia informs the group it might rain the next day, but she keeps up her positive attitude and asks them to pray to the rain gods for clear weather. Hearing this, Dorcas and two elderly women start breaking plates, as Nico told them it is a tradition in Greece. As a result, Georgia has to pay for the plates, but Dorcas won't let her pay, and she pockets Nico's purse to take out 10 euros and returns it to Georgia, keeping the rest to herself. Georgia enjoys talking to Irv, and when he asks her to go out on dates, she takes the hint and approaches Mark, much to Poopy's dismay. But things don't turn out as she expected once Mark starts rambling about his syrup obsession. He goes on, making Georgia and everybody around them beg to escape the boredom. The next day, surprisingly it is sunny, and the group is boarding the bus when Nico stops Gator and gives him a shirt that has something in Greek, written as a free gift, but asks him to keep it a secret. He then walks up to Georgia and starts making fun of her group before going back to his bus. Georgia, however, retaliates and asks him to stop talking bad about her group, as they are nice people, but Nico has already shut his ears to everything she says. She returns to her bus and Irv suggests she make her tour interesting by telling some explicit historical stories. Heeding his advice, Georgia starts doing that and immediately gets everybody's attention, even distracting Poopy enough to make him take his eyes off the road, leading to an accident that could have turned out horribly if he hadn't used the cliff as a medium to stop the bus. Even after narrowly escaping an accident, their spirits remain unfazed. Irv and another tourist tell Georgia that Poopy was checking her out, and she should talk to him. So Georgia decides to talk to Poopy, who is upset at himself for getting distracted and putting everybody's life in danger. However, when Georgia says she put up the act just because she was enjoying having fun, Poopy calms down. He remembers her asking what plans he has for himself, and inquiring about the name of the person who stands in front of an audience and waves a stick. Georgia matter-of-factly states they refer to him as Uncle Phil, but she realizes that is not what Poopy meant. He is referring to a conductor. Poopy continues that, just like a conductor who waves his stick and directs a beautiful melody, Poopy too sits in the driver's seat, turns the wheel, and takes the bus to the most beautiful places. His life goal is this, to have the best seat to the most beautiful places. He then picks up a flower and gives it to Georgia, who realizes it was Poopy all along who had been leaving flowers for her. He admires her passion for Greek history, but suggests rather than looking up, she should look from her heart, earning a cheer from the overzealous tourists. Next, she takes them to the Temple of Apollo, where she shows her group a stone, behind which the oracle would sit and answer the public's questions. Irv volunteers, and one of the Mexican women goes first, asking why her husband cheated on her. Irv replies that he didn't cheat on her, but he cheated himself out of living a life with a woman he loved. It brings a smile to the woman's face, and she thanks Irv. Next, it is Big Al and his wife's turn, who share they are scared of having children. Irv assures them that having children is the best feeling in the world, and that they are going to be great parents. Mrs. Tullen nudges Caitlin to ask a question, and angry about being put in the limelight, she asks if her parents will ever stop fighting and walks away angrily. Irv reminds the Tullens that they are supposed to set an example for their daughter. The last is the Australian couple, who ask Irv for directions to the toilet, before Irv is done. Meanwhile, Georgia thinks about the possibility of her getting together with Poopy, but it looks difficult, since she quit her job and most likely will be leaving the country. While climbing down the temple ruins in the evening, Dorcas starts crying upon seeing her husband walk without a walker, something she was praying for. Everybody believes that it is the power of Delphi, considered to be the center of the earth by the Greeks. But Dorcas says it was Irv, who blessed him on the bus that morning. Later that evening, at dinner, Georgia takes extra care to look cute. She joins Irv and asks if everybody in her group suddenly seems healthier and more alive. She speculates that Irv might be a god, but Irv is quick to dismiss it and says if he was really a god, he would have fixed his constipation first. Before she can leave to look for Poopy, Irv brings her attention to the shirt Gator is wearing. It is the same shirt that Nico gave him, and when she reads the print on it, she is horrified, because it reads something that gay men might be interested in. She runs to Gator, who is drinking with two Greek men, and asks where he got the shirt from. He reveals Nico gave it to him, but when she reveals what it says, he realizes the true intention of those men he's sitting with. He tackles Nico into the swimming pool. They start a pool fight, while everybody in Georgia's group starts cheering for Gator to beat Nico. Georgia sneaks out of the crowd and meets Poopy, who is sitting near the lake playing guitar. She joins him, and Poopy pours her a glass of wine and even feeds her an apple. He thinks this is the perfect time to escalate things, but Georgia stops him and tells him she is going to leave Greece soon, and that coming to Greece was an experiment to see if she could be spontaneous. But she can hardly concentrate with Poopy's charm mesmerizing her, and she gives in. They end up sleeping together. Later, she hears a noise and finds Irv with both the divorcee women and Dorcas with her husband playing push-ups. But one thing remains common among them: they don't have good air conditioning, so Georgia suggests they need to fend for their rights. She sends the ladies in her group to distract Nico, who is sitting at the bar sulking after getting beaten up by Gator. Meanwhile, Georgia, Irv, and Poopy steal the air conditioner from Nico's bus and install it on their bus. The next day, while Georgia's group is happy and cheerful, Nico is as irritated as can be. Seeing Caitlin still mad about the entire trip, Georgia asks Nico to take the bus to the beach and invite his 16-year-old nephews. She gets on the bus and asks the group if they want to try the air conditioner again, since it is sweltering outside. But the group doesn't want to take any chances with it. So Georgia asks Irv to cast his magic, and voila, it starts working perfectly fine, and everybody takes a breath of relief. There is more reason for them to be happy, because Georgia announces they will be going to the beach. As they're about to leave, Nico notices how happy Georgia and her group look, and he gives them a sheepish smile before they leave. They soon reach the beach, and everybody enjoys themselves thoroughly. Poopy's nephew joins them and easily makes friends with Caitlin. He introduces himself as Dowdy Caucus, which she expected. After a fun day, everybody gathers around the bonfire except for Irv, who takes a seat a little further. He's thinking about his late wife, when suddenly she appears before him and caresses him. He finally gets to kiss her after a long wait. Meanwhile, Georgia burns her blazer, as suggested by Irv a few days back, and Mark throws his phone, which was weighing on him the entire trip. They call for Irv to see that they did what he suggested, but find him collapsed. Irv is immediately rushed to the hospital, where the doctors keep him under observation. So the next day he can't join the group, and Georgia updates them on Irv's condition. They visit the Parthenon in Athens, and instead of telling them the history, Georgia tells them why she loves the place. She asks them to hear the sound of the wind blowing through the columns, and brings it to their notice that this is the same wind mankind has listened to for centuries, the sound of nature meeting human imagination. Even as they stand by the most beautiful structure, they cannot help but think of their friend Irv, who has touched their lives in ways no one had expected. Gator proposes they visit Irv at the hospital, and everybody agrees. They are about to leave when they hear Nico whining because he had to travel without air conditioning, which gave him a headache. He calls his group Americans who never stop complaining. Suddenly, a woman confronts Nico for calling them Americans, as it turns out the group is actually Canadian, who start beating Nico black and blue. Georgia and her group reach the hospital, and are glad to see Irv is awake and doing good. They meet him while he's being rolled out in a wheelchair, and everybody in the group has something to offer to Irv. They all bid him goodbye as the nurse asks them not to overcrowd, and Georgia thanks him, because if it were not for Irv, she wouldn't have found her mojo. It is the last night of the tour, and everybody is enjoying a night full of good music, good food, and good people. Poopy has finally cut his long locks, making him look so handsome that Georgia can hardly keep her eyes off him. She, too, wears a beautiful white dress, and as they get closer, their moment keeps getting interrupted by the overexcited group members. When Dorcas comes to talk to Georgia, Poopy goes to get drinks while Dorcas gives Georgia a piece of jewelry, and this time, she has a receipt for it. Soon, Maria arrives looking for Georgia, and walks up to her as soon as she spots her. She tells her that she has got excellent remarks from all her group members, which Maria thinks is a fluke. But when everybody claims they gave Georgia excellent reviews, she agrees to accept it, and says she can give Georgia a 10% raise and nothing more. Georgia is a little confused and asks if she got her letter, which Maria says she did. But other than the first sentence, everything is wiped off due to a coffee spill. Maria spots a handsome man next to Georgia and refuses to believe it is Poopy. Taking advantage of the situation, Poopy asks for a full-time job as a driver, while Maria offers Georgia a 20% raise. Georgia asks why she is being nice to her, which has never happened before, so Maria reluctantly hands Georgia a letter of acceptance from Michigan University and tells her she got a job there. But Georgia is clear where she wants to be, and ends up taking the 20% raise after Maria tells her Nico quit, and she only tolerated him because she knew his father. So Georgia ends up staying in Greece, even with no idea what is going to happen. But she has waited for a long time to be happy, and now that she is there, she wouldn't change it for anything in the world.